From the center of the universe and the home of your Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the X's and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the X's and Argos postgame reaction podcast, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. The Argos have something brewing. They won 45-24 over the previously undefeated British Columbia Lions. JB, before we get into this, and there's a lot to break down, I want to talk for a second about Something in the Water Brewing. We are a week away from Longboat being available in cans. They've got so many great beers. And the thing I love about all of Something in the Water's beer is that everything's got something unique to it. It's not just like, you know, your boring old lager or pale ale or whatever. There's always something that you take a sip and you're like, oh, that's really neat. And, you know, for me, like some of my favorites, I gotta say I like Longboat the best because it's the Argos themed beer. But even something like Hazy Maitland, just the texture of it, the sort of citrusy flavor in it. There's always something to sort of catch you. And for somebody that enjoys beer like me, like you, JB, yeah, it's a brewery that can't be beat. So make sure you check out Something in the Water in Liberty Village. JB, how does anyone look at this Toronto Argonaut team right now and not say they are clearly the best football team in the CFL?
Yeah, I mean, my instinct is to defer to Winnipeg, but I agree. I think that this is a very good football team. It's very deep. It's well coached, and I think they can play with anybody in the league. I think that's been shown.
Because I think BC coming in was sort of the consensus number one. I think people knew that, you know, BC and Winnipeg, could go back and forth. I expect Winnipeg to beat BC when they play next in BC. And so I think they're sort of comparable teams. But BC just blew out the Blue Bombers last week. And the Argos are certainly a more banged up team than the Lions. The Lions really just missing Lucky Whitehead, which is the difference. But the Argos are down a ton of guys. And so for them to come in there and show up in all three phases, they scored on specials, they scored on defense, they did a lot of things on defense, and the offense was good. So it was a complete game. You put up 45 points on a team that has a shutout this season, on a team that hadn't allowed a touchdown in a couple of weeks. It's saying something. I thought the Argos played well. I give a lot of credit to the coaching staff. They fixed things that needed to be fixed. They had their players focused. The Argos obviously took this game very seriously, and it showed in the stats. It showed in the game. It showed in the scoring.
Yeah, it was a terrific football game, and the it's possible that BC's quarterback has turned back into a pumpkin.
Yeah, well, Vernon Adams, we knew, and you talked about this when we did OCDC this past week, that you have to force Vernon Adams to take those shots, not to just be content throwing those short yardage plays. You wanted VA to be thrown downfield because that's when mistakes start to happen. And they got into a situation today. He was playing okay to start. And then as soon as Toronto jumped out to a lead and BC was behind, we saw some of the, I don't want to say the old Vernon Adams because there were really good parts to the old Vernon Adams too, but when he is just firing it, it's dangerous for the team he's on. And the Argos took full advantage. Did they have 6 interceptions at the end of this game? That's pretty phenomenal.
It's what he, you used to be able to set your watch by it. Just wait long enough. And once he starts taking those deep shots, there's going to be some balls in play.
And it's funny. You look at his stats. If you just look at the first 3 columns, it looks like he had a great day. His completion percentage isn't bad. He threw for 388 yards and 3 touchdowns. But then column number 4, 6 interceptions, half of which were Robertson Daniel. We'll talk about him as we get going. But let's talk about how the game started out, because it was pretty conservative to start. You could tell whether it was from the crowd, whether it was from the sort of air around the stadium. It was just an intensity to it. It felt playoff-like, which is weird for what was the Argos' third game of the regular season, but it felt very real. And both teams came out kind of conservatively, punt and punt to start. And then BC put a nice drive together, aided by a penalty. I think it was Sean Oakman who had a late hit on the quarterback. And then Vernon Adams throws a
pretty
beautiful
soft call.
Yeah, seeing the replay, it wasn't a great call, but I get it. I understand the call. And then Adams threw a beautiful, beautiful ball on the corner route to Rhymes. And Rhymes is a problem, but they just seemed, after that touchdown pass, he seemed to have trouble connecting to him, and he seemed to have lost a little bit of the accuracy after that. But that drive to go up 7-0, I was concerned at that point for the Argos, because you don't want to get behind against a good defense like the BC Lions have. And instead, the Argos found a way to respond, but it wasn't the way that you would think. The traditional way Toronto responds is not on special teams. And here they have a huge touchdown from Javon Leake, who takes a punt 91 yards for a touchdown. That was such a big moment. I don't know if I was happier for Mickey Donovan, the special teams coordinator, or Javon Leake. They both deserve that one very much. It was great to see.
Yeah, we've been riding them pretty hard about their special team failures or weaknesses, but it seemed to be really the only weakness the team had. And tonight they came out and, basically shut us up. They came out and looked great on specials. Coverage was excellent for the most part. Punt return wasn't really that special, but that one touchdown was amazing, was a game changer, and beautifully blocked, like not just like a lucky break. It was a beautifully blocked, beautifully run return for a touchdown.
If you watch that punt return touchdown, you'll see it looks exactly the way you draw up a punt return touchdown, punt return play, where you've got cross blocks happening and you've got a lane that forms. And Leak also has to read that perfectly, and he did. He's, zigging and zagging through that lane that was created for him, and then he made a heck of a move. It was on the punter, but still, we've seen punters corner people to the sidelines, get them out of bounds, trip them up, whatever it is. He made a nice, really hard step to the outside, got back inside. And even at that point, I wondered if someone might catch him, but he's just got when he gets to his top gear, he is gone, and no one was even closing distance on him. I think I'm happier for Coach Donovan on that, because he must have been, after last week's game, he must have been so stressed about all of his units needing a game like this, where they're perfect on field goals. They punted well. I think Haggerty had a 59-yard punt into the wind or something ridiculous like that. And then they've got a punt return touchdown. And not just that, the coverage teams were really good. And one of the keys to that was Quintez Stiggers, who we haven't really seen get a lot of special teams time. He wasn't dressed last week, but getting to dress Stiggers and Calver, having Brissett out there playing special teams along with Adeboboye, I think they may have found that unit. And you're a big fan of like rolling over until you find a solution. Just keep churning the roster until you find the guys that can do it. This may be the combination that gets it done on the coverage team.
Yeah, I mean, Stiggers is clearly a fantastic athlete, and I think that if you can work it out in terms of whatever the ratios are, but if you can have him on your roster as a backup cornerback / special teams ace, I think that is maximizing his use to the team rather than sitting him and having him not dressed. I would much rather sit a defensive lineman who, who they are and what they do, but they're not going to be able to provide what Stiggers can on specials.
And the Argos did go light on the defensive line. Last week, they dressed 9 defensive linemen, only dressing 7 tonight so that they could have Quintez Stiggers out there backing up he was backing up a corner technically, but I noticed when Robertson Daniel went down to be evaluated for a concussion, Quintez Stiggers was the guy that came in. He came in at halfback, and that tells you something right there, that they're trusting that halfback spot to a 21-year-old rookie. it speaks volumes as to how far he's come in his progress, because halfback, that's not something you typically come in and just pick up right away in the CFL. Americans coming in learn to play corner first, and then when it's going well, then they start to expand your role a little bit. And for him to have picked that up already speaks volumes to his potential and his ceiling. So Argos end up going up a touchdown, but we saw some problems, potentially problems we have addressed before. The Argos end up going up on a Cam Dukes quarterback sneak for 1 yard after a couple attempts and an offside on the BC Lions. And we've talked about this before. I like Cam Dukes. I think he's a good running quarterback. I think he's an exciting quarterback with the ball in his hands. He is not the right guy for quarterback sneaks. You agree with me. Is this the second time we've seen him sort of pulled from that role in a game? Is this the last time we see Cameron Dukes as a quarterback sneak guy?
Well, I don't. You definitely like him more than I do. No offense to him or his family or what have you, but I think that they should go find somebody else for that role. I don't know. I don't know whether it seems to be that they're okay with Dukes doing it most of the time, unless they really, really need it. That's kind of a weird. They kind of did that with McLeod, right? Where like it didn't really work, and then they would leave McLeod in sometimes, and sometimes they wouldn't. So I guess it's okay. It's just Dukes. I don't like the way he runs it at all. I don't like how he isn't moving with the line. He isn't using the center as protection. He's kind of jumping over and looking for a gap. He's not that big a guy. I don't really blame him. It's not what he's built for. It just seems to be, well, you're the third quarterback, so this is what you should do. And I just don't think that that's a fair fit for him. So I don't know. I mean, it's the bye week now. Would I be shocked if they had a different QB3 in? No.
I get what you're saying. And I think if you're being forced to dress three quarterbacks, which teams are, then I do believe that your third quarterback should be a guy that, above all else, is a good quarterback sneak quarterback. And it's not always measurables. Like Chad Kelly on paper shouldn't really be good at quarterback sneaks. It's not like he's overly big or overly powerful or fast. He's very good at it. I'm sure there are times, but I can't remember Chad Kelly getting stuffed on a quarterback sneak. More often than not, he's getting 1.5 yards on those. And he did that tonight. After that, the issues, and it wasn't on that touchdown drive, but that was, they did get stuffed once. And later in the game, they go for it on third down. We'll talk about that play maybe a little bit later, but that doesn't convert. And from then on, you see Chad Kelly in short yardage. But I just think until you have someone, and maybe you don't ever have someone, but you've got to put Chad out there, because you talked about when it's really important. A quarterback sneak is always important because it's on 3rd and 1, and you're turning the ball over if you don't get it. So for me, if there's no one else that you feel you can go out and get, and then have Dukes and Scott battle it out for QB2, then I think you just got to stick with Chad, and he's your short yardage guy, and you just have to deal with the fact that your starting quarterback's going to take some extra hits. It's not uncommon to see in professional football, the starting quarterback is also the quarterback sneak guy. It doesn't seem to be a thing in the CFL, but in other football leagues, the same guy stays in. So Toronto ends up, they're up 14-7. BC comes back, ties it up. Were you, when it was tied at 14, did you feel like this was a game that was going Toronto's way, or did you feel like they were letting things slip away? Because again, it was just, a weird series of event, a long busted play down the sideline. I still don't even know what happened on that play, but BC seemed to get into the end zone very quickly to tie it up at 14.
No, I wasn't that worried, because I felt like that the defense had a very good sense of what they wanted to do, and that was a bust. And then in the end zone, I don't know, they were playing zone again. I'm not a big fan of playing zone in the end zone, as we've talked about. I don't know, it didn't those kind of quick strike things don't really worry me, because they're like, honestly, it's like a special teams touchdown. you're like, okay, you dust yourself off and you get back at it, because the majority of the game in terms of the line of scrimmage was being won by Toronto. So I felt pretty confident, to be honest. Even at 14-14, I felt like Toronto was the better team tonight.
I did too. I really wasn't concerned. You know what? The turning point for me actually came during the week when you and I were at practice. They were practicing indoors. I don't remember the name of the facility up in Woodbridge. And we saw Coach Dinwiddie snap on the defense. They had jumped offside, and he just ripped the defense for jumping. And you could tell from the intensity in his voice that he understood the magnitude of the game that they were going into this week against BC. But more telling for me was not Coach Dinwiddie snapping, but that after that, and for the rest of practice, all the way through cool down stretches, there wasn't a sound. You could not hear a single person speak, because they all recognized, Coach is right. Like, we got to get it together here. And so from that moment on, I was actually quite confident Toronto would win this game. We both picked them anyway, but I felt really good after that moment.
Yeah, it was impressive. He's an offensive coach. It's not easy for offensive coaches to kind of MF the defense. And for the defense to listen to that and to respect that is not an automatic. And you could tell that the team, sees him, the whole team sees him as their coach. It was very heartening to see it. It's what a good team does. A good team knows when they're making mistakes and will, kind of act appropriately, where a team full of idiots, might be quiet for 10 seconds or 30 seconds and then they revert back, and then you're just constantly yelling at them. So it was great to see, I think, that how the team reacted to the intensity of Coach. So I agree. It definitely was oddly confidence inspiring to see the coach kind of take the team apart.
Toronto goes up by a touchdown again to make it 21-14. This one I want to talk about a little bit, because this was a fantastic Chad Kelly moment. Toronto is on the BC 17-yard line. Chad Kelly rolls to his right. He's sort of scrambling at this point. He ends up throwing back across his body under the uprights where Vernon Daniels is there, who jumps up and makes a catch. And the reason I want to highlight this is, so often when you see an inexperienced quarterback throw across his body, it's the wrong thing to do. It's something that you should not do. You hear that from the age of 6 when you start throwing a football. Don't throw back across your body. Don't throw back across the field, because bad things always happen. What I like about this play is you could see that Chad knew where he was going from the moment he left the pocket. He knew DeVaris was coming back across, and he was just waiting for him to get there, and he's keeping his eye on the corner of the end zone to hold defenders. And then as soon as DeVaris cleared traffic, he zipped it in there to him, and he's got the speed to make sure that it gets there in a hurry and no one can intercept it, can get in between it. And it was such a big moment for DeVaris too, because he hasn't had a big game yet, and he should be the guy. He should have been the guy last week with Curly Gittens Jr. out. He should have been the guy in the first game, but it was DeMonte Coxie. He stepped up. It was great to see DeVaris step up today. He had a really nice game, had a touchdown, was walking a little gingerly at the end of the game. That makes me nervous. We'll see what happens. At least they're going into the bye. But I just thought that play was a real highlight for me.
Yeah, I wish, obviously that Tavares was more a part of the offense, but he is still fantastic red zone. One of the more impressive things I've found about Kelly is that every game he gets better. This game, his completion percentage was way up, which is terrific. He threw a little more on the run, which was great to see. A few more touch passes, not always rocket arm, which was great to see. And that he doesn't, like a lot of quarterbacks will lock in on basically one receiver. and become kind of a partnership. And what's really great to see is he doesn't seem to have that need for like a security blanket, that he trusts all those guys. He's really just throwing to the open receiver, which is something you don't get a lot of quarterbacks doing. Honestly, you look around the league and the stars tend to get all the targets and all the catches, and he is really good at just looking for guys who are open. Still, a couple times he throws balls he shouldn't, but I'm not gonna get mad at that.
Yeah, I actually, and I didn't see much in the way of that today. Like he did launch a few downfield, but I felt like they were close to 50-50. One was a 50-50 ball. One was, he was kind of throwing into double coverage, but there was no chance of it getting picked either. So
no, that's fair enough.
And I don't mind those. And I thought, speaking of Chad Kelly and growth, and this was something I asked Coach Dinwiddie about after the game. Chad took 2 sacks, both of which I thought were perfectly fine, because in both plays he had rolled out to his right and the guy he was looking for wasn't there. And instead of trying to force it in or just throw it up and hope, knowing where they were in the game, he decided the smart thing to do here is to take the sack. And he held into the ball to the last minute. I guess he could have thrown it out of bounds. That maybe that's better, but to not throw it into trouble, I thought showed that some learning had occurred. So I applauded him for that. And Coach Dinwiddie did on he said one of the 2 he agreed, and he wasn't sure about the other one though. But that's what a coach is going to say too. So that started a run. Toronto went on a 21-3 run. I want to talk about a couple of things though as we get out of that second quarter. So Boris Bede boots the ball a mile, goes into the back of the end zone. BC surrenders the Rouge. Where are you on that for kickoffs? I love the 8-point touchdown. I think if you can do that every single time, I don't care that the ball comes out to the 40. I will take that extra point every single time on a kickoff. Are you of that mind, or do you want to float 100%. It up?
The 8-point touchdown, I think, absolutely. It changes the game. It forces your opponent to try and go for 2. It changes the math of how they can catch up, and suddenly you're 16 points ahead instead of 14, and now it's field goals and touchdowns. Absolutely, I think you should try and go for it all the time.
I agree, and it's not the same as punting, because with a kickoff, your average return is coming out to about the 30-yard line anyway. So you're only talking about a difference of 10 yards. It's not the same as like a coffin corner punt that gets down at the 5 or goes out of bounds at the 5, as opposed to going in the end zone for a Rouge coming out to the 40.
You're talking about 15 yards.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, that makes it worth it. I love that Bede had the wind at his back. He's not Boris Bede. I don't know if fans understand what a treasure he is in terms of kickoff. He's not only the all-time CFL leader in kickoff average. He is improving on that this season. This is his best season so far on kickoff average, and he's already the best in CFL history since they started recording that stat. So it's a huge advantage. And with that new rule where you can get a Rouge on kickoff, even if it goes out the back of the end zone, you just know there's going to be a really windy game where he's able to do that every single time he kicks off. Let's talk about that Cam Phillips play at the end of the second quarter. Argos are driving. They have an opportunity to not put BC away, but to really separate themselves in terms of the score. It's 25-14 at this stage. They have the ball late at midfield. Clock is ticking down. If they can kick a field goal there, it's a 2-touchdown game going to the half. They complete a pass just over midfield. There's 8 seconds left, but the clock stops as they get reset. And then Chad Kelly throws a quick ball to Cam Phillips, who is, I guess, has the ball in his hands with 3 seconds to go. And the correct move at that stage is to hit the deck. As soon as you catch that ball, you hit the deck. And they've been drilled about this. They know these Canadian rules, especially a guy like Phillips. He's not in his first year in the CFL. But you just got to go to ground there because the clock, it doesn't matter. After that, as long as there's time on the clock when you go to ground, it can, once you blow it in, it can go to 0. That doesn't matter. You can run out your field goal team. You can kick that field goal. I was worried that was going to be a huge momentum shift because it felt like everything was going Toronto's way, and then they threw away 3 points at the end of the half.
Yeah, I wasn't that worried about it. Honestly, I didn't. I felt like that was fine. And then he got a bit hurt anyway, so I didn't. I was fine that it just kind of dissolved.
But that made it worse too, because he took a shot that he shouldn't have taken. Just catch the ball, go to ground. But I also feel like that's something that needs to be talked about a little bit in the huddle. However, they were going hurry up, so you didn't have a chance to yell that to everybody. But everyone on the sideline, as soon as he caught that ball, is yelling, "Go down, go down, go down." And he just stayed on his feet too long. But, it ended up working out. But I do think just little lessons like that, it's good to learn those in a win. And then the next time that comes up, we don't have a repeat of the same incident. So it ends up being 25-14 at halftime. Toronto comes out and immediately gets into trouble. JB, let's talk about the decision to go for it on 3rd and 1 from the Toronto 39, I think it was, Toronto 40-yard line.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Well, look, in general, I am pro going for it. I think certainly when I coached and when I watched football, to me, anything from the 50 and in is an automatic go. I thought in the first half there was a ball they had on the BC 45 or 46 where they didn't go for it. They ended up taking a time violation, and then they punt, and then it would end up being like 18 yards, just a waste of time. So I go for it there. In the second half, I wasn't crazy about that call. I thought that they had a nice lead on BC, leave BC asleep. When your opponent is not doing well, don't interrupt them. It was a good solid yard, and I was pro punt there. And let's punt and let the D do what they do. So that's where I came down. That's a punt there for me, not a go. I thought it was a risky go for, like, you look at risk and reward. They were gaining was a chance to go 2 more downs, as opposed to potentially giving up incredible field position for BC to score a touchdown. So they escaped the touchdown, but doesn't mean it's the right decision.
And I disagree with you philosophically on that, because you say what's to be gained is 2 more downs. What's to be gained is the potential of a touchdown. It's at the very least 2 more downs, but you might score a touchdown on that drive. That's your goal on every drive.
Yeah, but you're still so far away. You're still in the middle of the field. You could have a touchdown from anywhere. It's not plausible that you have a higher chance at a touchdown. You're still only at the 50-yard line. I don't know. I thought it was very risky, especially for a team that's not particularly good at converting short yardage.
And that's the issue that I think needs to be resolved. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, but I agree. I think philosophically, any 3rd and 1, I don't care where you are in the field, on 3rd and 1 in Canadian football, I think you should go for it. You can be at your own 3, and I think you should go for it on 3rd and 1. Not that that's mathematically possible, but I still think you should go for it, and no matter where you are. The problem is, if you don't think you can get it, then that's where I think you need to change something. So at the professional level, if you can't convert 3rd and 1 reliably, and it's never going to be 100% of the time, but if you can't convert at a 90 to 95% rate, then you have to examine the mechanism and look at, well, what are the pieces here? Why can't we convert it? We're given a free yard. How come we can't get a yard on this play? And so that's where they do need to look at maybe keeping Chad Kelly in there. Because I think if Chad Kelly's in, they do convert, because he always does. And so I didn't have a problem with the play call. I have a problem with the way it's being executed. And the only other play calls I had issues with there were not going for field goals, because there were a couple times in this game where they elected not to kick what would have been like 53-yard field goals. And yeah, that's a long field goal, but Boris Bede is on right now. He's started the season on fire. He's got way more range than 53. Pre-game, he was hitting from 65. And so I just don't know why you wouldn't attempt a field goal. And in the CFL, I know there's the danger of a return, but a missed field goal most of the time ends up being kind of like a punt anyway. And I know instead of like, you would probably be in favor of at least field goal attempt, if not going for it, instead of punting in those situations where you're in the opponent's end.
Yeah. I wouldn't have a rule. It would depend on, what I saw in warm up from the kicker. And I don't actually hate punting to bury a team. I just wouldn't do it once you get over the 50.
I felt and these were all like at BC's 46.
Yeah, once you're in your
like
opponent's territory, to me, I agree with you. I think you try and kick a field goal, or you go. I would go like more than field goal. I would just go. I think you just go, and if you get stopped, it's really not a terrible place to give the ball over, because like probably it's going to be where the other team's going to be after one play anyways. So I would just go more than kick a field goal. I think you just have a nice short yardage play and convert that thing.
The running game got going in the second half, and that was a huge boost for the Argos because they could not run at all in the first half. They had 7 yards rushing in the first half. AJ Ouellette only had 3 attempts. They just weren't trying to run because BC was stuffing the box. They came in with the same plan they beat Winnipeg with last week, where they're going to take away the run, and they did that successfully in the first half. Although I will say, I give Coach Demery credit for not trying to run against a heavy box like that. In the second half, as guys started getting a little tired on defense, that's when he did go to the run. And so while Ouellette had 3 carries in the first half, he had 11 carries in the second half and 7 yards rushing total as a team in the first half. They end up with, I believe, over 100 yards. Yes, they had over 100 yards rushing by the end of the game. So that opened up in the second half. But one of the ways in which they did it was being a bit creative with the run game, because BC was jamming the middle. They found some cool ways to get outside. And how big was that Chad Kelly run too, where they're sitting on AJ Ouellette. He pulls the ball, nobody goes with Kelly, and he runs for 18 yards, which I thought was huge. And you talked about that a few weeks ago, saying that Kelly doesn't necessarily need to be a runner, but you can take advantage of his running ability sometimes.
Yeah, and it opens things up. Once teams have to respect the keep, you don't have to run the keep that often for it to work. I think if once or twice a game you keep it and go, then that action just becomes so much more effective, right? Because now flow is not going to come 100 miles an hour, because you have to watch out for the leak out or the reverse. So yeah, I like it. I like once or twice a game letting him run. I think the team feeds off it. I think he feeds off it. It is one of those things where like that's the thing he loves to do. Every quarterback is kind of different, and for me, it feeds Chad when he gets a run. It feeds the part of him that wants to smash his head into the opponent. And that's a good thing. I think it gets his heart going. So I'm all for it a couple of times a game.
And once the Argos got up 35-17, to me it was over. I just didn't see any way that the Lions were going to be able to come back from that. We're now talking, was it mid to late third quarter at this stage, and the Argos just piled it on. They end up winning by 21 points.
Yeah, I mean, the Argos have shown themselves to be highly efficient at squeezing all the air out of the ball with their running backs. Their ball hawking DBs just hunting teams that are trying to come back from deficits. They are. It is a skill that winning teams have, which is if I get to half and I'm winning, you are dead. And right now, that's where the Argos are at. You do not want to try and come back against this team. They are too good at blitzing. Their DBs are looking for interceptions, and they are just playing smash mouth football. They're really good at running the clock in the second half. They've shown that now a couple of times. Robertson
Daniel was so good today.
Oh, unbelievable. I mean, you talk about Mechie, getting shout-outs. I mean, that I said to somebody tonight, like, that's a season.
Yeah.
Like, 3 picks, a tip for a pick, and a pick six. Like, guys go a whole season without registering that. And, so like, yeah, I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, no, he had a heck of a game. And then the one series he came out for because he was being evaluated for a concussion, his replacement, Qantas Stiggers, goes in and he gets a pick in the exact same spot that Robertson Daniel would have been standing in cover 2. So it was great for Stiggers though too. Like we talked about him on special teams and what an addition he is. But yeah, to go back there as a halfback and come up with that pick, hang on to the ball through heavy contact, it shows his ball skill and just his pure athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows how we thought he was going to be great. I mean, even Coach talked at the press conference. He's had to deal with a lot of injuries. So we had really high hopes. We both thought that he would be a significant part of the team last year. So it's fantastic to watch.
Yeah, Robertson Daniel had Vernon Adams' number. I don't know if it was from film study or what, but he was able to track where that ball was going so often, because it wasn't just the 3 interceptions, which is a pretty fantastic number. He should really have caught the one that Jonathan Jones intercepted, because it hit Robertson Daniel in the hands and then bounced up into Jonathan Jones's hands. So he should really have had 4. And then if you want to really stretch it, the one that Qantas Stiggers caught in his position could have been 5, I guess. But, we're kind of projecting now. But what a game. He just found a way to undercut receivers and just knew where the ball was going before it was thrown. And Vernon couldn't see him.
It made me sad that the players don't come out for the presser anymore.
Yeah, that's, after, just to, take you behind the curtain a little bit here, after post game, after the game finishes, JB and I go across to the post game press conferences, and during the pandemic in the last 2 seasons, what has traditionally happened is they would send out Coach Dinwiddie, followed by the quarterback, and then followed by 3 or 4 players that the organization felt they wanted to represent them. Usually it was guys that played a big role in the game, and he definitely would have been a guy that came out. And so instead of it being a presser, it's now a far more informal, locker room scrums and things like that. And it's just not the same to be able to have Robertson Daniel just sitting there in front of the cameras and the lights and the mic, and to be able to smile and talk about the game that he had, I think is bigger for him than doing, the same thing in front of, a microphone shoved in your face.
I agree. I always thought it was a really nice thing, especially for guys who didn't get to do it all the time. And yeah, it's a shame. And
presumably it'll go back to that, come playoff time. But I assume it's going to be like this for the remainder of the season, because it's what it was before, and so they've reverted back to that. But it is too bad, because that I don't know, some of those moments, like I remember Tommy Neald after catching the winning touchdown against BC last year. Tommy Neald, who hadn't done anything at that point, catches the game-winning play on like a 40-yard bomb, and I just remember him sitting in the press conference table just beaming, and he was so happy to be there and to answer questions. And that moment for guys is so much bigger than when it's done in front of your locker. Let's talk about the pressure for a second, because I know the DBs are going to get a lot of credit for the 6 picks, and they should, but the pass rush is what set a lot of those picks up, because there were times where Vernon Adams was rushed, where he had to step up in the pocket and throw just before being hit. And at least 2 of the interceptions were a direct result of pressure on Vernon Adams. And so while they may not have been the sack exchange today, they still as a team picked up 3 quarterback sacks. Costigan, Remolade, and Jones each had a sack. I think you have to give them an assist on at least a couple of those picks. The line was awesome today.
Yeah, line. Well, we talked about before the game that their only hope of winning, or not their only hope, but their best chance of winning, was the defensive line having a day, keeping Adams, moving, guessing, off balance, because that's how when we played Montreal, that's when he was at his worst. And the line played fantastic today. They got great pressure with 4. Came really close to sacking him a bunch of times. Did a good job of not letting him take off either. Young Tiami Castigan looks amazing. And, I mean, the line looks great.
Yeah, they do. They really do. And I love also how aggressive Coach Mace continues to be. It's so exciting. I love aggressive football on offense, on defense. I love putting the opponent on their back foot, because in situations that typically aren't aggressive defensive situations, Mace will blitz. There was that 2nd and 23 where Toronto lines up with a 3-man line. And I don't think anyone in the entire stadium thought Toronto was going to blitz out of that. They do. They sent two. They sent like a halfback and the Sandbacker. Both came flying in at the last second. And it forced Vernon Adams to rush the throw. They had only long routes dialed up for that. Nobody checked into their nobody checked into a different route or a hot read or anything like that. And it forced the incompletion. So, that kind of aggression I love, even on that second last drive where most teams are going to prevent. Instead, Toronto's sending 6. So I love the pressure. It hasn't really burned them yet. It might at some point, but I'm okay with that. Take the chance. I would much rather die blitzing than you slowly picking apart a prevent defense. So JB, let's get into our players of the game and our play of the game. There really is only one way we can go for player of the game. So I'm going to come up with a backup. I will let you do the honors for the player of the game, but I think it's pretty obvious probably to all of our listeners.
Well, for me, yeah. I initially, my hipster play of the game, that should be a new category, was a pass knockdown that I thought was a real turning point, where Adams was getting the ball off really quickly, and the defensive line and CN Power finally got their arms up and knocked a pass down, and that was kind of the end of the drive. But my actual play of the game is the punt return touchdown. Not only is it something Toronto never does, but it absolutely electrified the crowd. It made the Argos were obviously overjoyed to get this free touchdown that they normally never do. You could just feel an energy because, who knows, BC, if you're down 1 touchdown, if you go down 2, it's a very different game. You're going up against BC. They're built to get up big. So if you go down 2 touchdowns, you might not come away with that win. So I thought the timing, the energy, the electricity of it, everything was fantastic.
And for me, my play of the game is going to be the pick 6, just because it was so deserved after the season so far that Robertson Daniel has had. He had a spectacular week 1, was, I believe, as I recall, the highest ranked player on PFF in week 1, or in game 1. Game 2, he ends up with 2 fumble recoveries. And now in game 3, he has 3 interceptions. And the previous 2, the first and second interception, he had nice returns on too. He immediately looked for his blocking instead of just, you see so many DBs, they pick off the ball and then they just keep, run straight forward because you're not usually getting that far. He picked off the ball and he's looking to see, where are my guys? Where can I set up? And he was able to get great returns out of those. And that last one was a thing of beauty. And, took it all the way to the house, which was just a great cap on a fantastic night for Robertson Daniel. And what about player of the game? Is he your guy, JB?
No, well, yeah. I mean, Robertson. I thought you were asking about Leak. Robertson Daniel is my player of the game. I don't have a hipster choice. I think he had a season in a game, and he even came out for a concussion, and checked and came back in, and had a pick 6 to top off the night. I think he was, player of the month. Never mind player of the game. So yeah, player of the game for sure for Daniel.
And I agree with you, but just to have some variety, I'm going to go with Chad Kelly, and here's why. Chad Kelly had a highly efficient game from start to finish. He, in the first two contests, played really well in the first half, wasn't asked to do much in the second half. Here he was asked to go wire to wire, ends up 23 of 29, great completion percentage, 250 yards passing with a touchdown. These are really good numbers. He added by contributing in the run, and he didn't make mistakes. You look at the other side, where Vernon Adams threw 6 interceptions, Chad Kelly has a clean sheet, and that was exactly what you wanted. And the rest of the team was contributing. I thought Chad Kelly looked like a professional out there. The fact that he's changing plays in the fourth quarter at the line of scrimmage, he looked like a veteran quarterback, and that was really the only unknown about the Toronto Argonauts this season is what's their quarterback play going to be like. I feel like Chad Kelly has done something better every single game, and this was by far his best full game as a Toronto Argonauts quarterback. So I will give my player of the game nod to Chad Kelly. Injuries, what are you worried about? We're going to the bye week. We've got some things. Like I'm worried about Dylan Giffen. We don't know the extent of his injury. We'll have to wait and see what's up with him. I know Robertson Daniel was a little bit banged up at the end of the game. I think he's going to be all right, but he didn't look in great shape. Did anything else catch you from this game where someone went down that I'm missing?
Giffen.
Yeah, the Giffen one's that's the biggest concern because he was playing so well. At least they have a ton of depth on the O-line, but we don't know how long. Cage is going to be out, and that does affect the line. But the nice thing about, at least if you're losing a guard and if you're not expecting Bladek back yet, at least you can move Nicastro over to guard and have Sirocco play center. I was almost surprised they didn't do that today when Giffen went down. But then I realized that you don't do that. You don't want to bring in a new center mid-game if you can avoid it. It's just there's too many moving parts there. So I think the correct move was to bring in McKellar to play that right guard spot. But yeah.
I've got a question for you.
Go for it.
Does Jonathan Jones lose his spot?
If Jordan Williams is healthy and ready to go?
Yeah.
I think so. I think you still play Jordan Williams. I know Jonathan Jones has been great. I think Jonathan Jones still dresses. You still find ways to get him onto the field. And Coach Mace is great at that.
Maybe it's more like a rotational thing, and if they want a different look with Jones than they get with Jordan. But he definitely has earned I think he has earned his way to he and Williams being a little more rotational with each other as opposed to him being a straight backup.
Yeah, I know. I can't argue that. He's been great. Every time he's been called on, even last year, like when McManus goes down, Jones steps up and he's fantastic. Remember the pick that he had in Montreal, and like there's so many plays he made in the Grey Cup game. He's all over the place.
Yeah, I think he's the most underrated guy on the team.
But there's like 10 of those guys. Like so is Hendricks. So is there's like Robertson Daniel was until tonight. He's not going to be underrated anymore. But there's about 10 Argos where you're like, how has nobody in the league picked up on how good this guy is? And yeah, he's right in that list. So JB, we go into a bye week. So we're going to have our bye week pod coming to you a midweek before the CFL games get going so that we can make our picks and see how many golden fleeces we have in our betting segment, etc. I don't know. I haven't tallied anything today, but I gather from your
I changed
grunt.
my bet at the last second, and I should have trusted my instinct. My original bet would have paid off.
Yeah, and I will back you up. You did tell me about that, and then you switched on me mid-pod. You didn't even tell me you were going to switch.
I don't know why I changed.
It's so a rule of betting. Don't change your bet at the window. If you go up to the window.
That's exactly what happened. I changed my bet at the window.
Yeah, and it does happen. But yeah, I think both of mine came through, but we'll tally that up midweek. So we will be back midweek with our regularly scheduled podcast, but obviously with a bye, we don't have a game to review at the end of the week. But yeah, this is a nice one. The Argos are the only undefeated team left in the CFL. They're at the top of the East Division, and now they can sit back and watch the festivities as we see what happens to the Hamilton Tiger Cats, the Alouettes, the Red Blacks, the rest of the East, see what they get up to this week. Well, that will just about do it for us on this post-game reaction podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
fight the foe.